Dangerous, How Robert Dudley Edwards Changed Irish History Forever. We're joined in studio by the author, Neasa MacErlean. And Neasa, thank you for joining us on the programme today. Tell us a bit about your grandfathers. First, we might start with Henry McErlean, who ran the Garda administration office here in Galway during the 1950s.
Yeah, good morning, John. That's right. Henry McErlean, my Galway grandfather, he'd actually come down after the War of Independence because he had been involved in fighting in that for the IRA, and it wasn't feasible for him to live in the north anymore. So he came down south. Was like many men in his position, he was offered the alternative between joining the army or becoming a guard. So because he didn't want to be involved in conflict anymore, he joined the Guards and ran the admin office here for over 30 years. I think one thing that connects both of my grandparents and many people who'd be listening, their families too, was that it was at this stage in the 1920s, 1930s, that individuals could see that their way out to broaden their lives was through education. Education was being funded by the state increasingly, and so all four of my grandparents got that bug and changed their lives, transformed them by the education they had.
Your book is predominantly about Professor Robert Dudley Edwards. Tell us about him.
Yeah, but he really believed in education himself. He was UCD Professor of Modern Irish History for 35 years, but he created a kind of revolution within history, within the study of history, and also within education. Within the study of history, what he decided to do was to trust the 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds that he was teaching, to say, think for yourselves. I'm not going to teach you to learn facts off by heart. You'll need the facts, but then you need to analyse them, and then you can produce your opinions. And the end result of that has actually been, as Professor Roy Foster of Oxford University has said, is that Ireland has produced an almost embarrassing quantity of marvellous historians who work around the world now. So it was really a kind of liberation of the mind that he was seeking to introduce there. And it was very controversial, because once you start saying to 18-year-olds or to anyone, think for yourself, in a way you're challenging what the state story has been.
Did that lead to some revisionism of some of the big players in Irish history over the decades and centuries?
Revisionism is quite a difficult word to deal with, because it's sort of slightly in code and it means various different things to different people. If you just take it on its literal level, well then we all revise, because the more that you know about a subject, you'll change your views on it. So you could take as an example, and this one isn't often used, but St Patrick, soon after Dudley, as he was called, began transforming the infrastructure of history. He created a journal called Irish Historical Studies, in which St Patrick was debated, and had St Patrick ever actually lived, or was he just kind of invented somehow by the Catholic Church? And you can imagine how worried the Catholic Church and even the state was by that. In the end, eventually, after decades, it was proved that St Patrick existed, but we always need to revise our views based on the evidence.
One thing that's looked at in the book is restoring the reputation of Daniel O'Connell, we all know as the Liberator. How did he play a part in that?
Well, in fact, you might be surprised, but 50 years ago, Daniel O'Connell's reputation was pretty much down in the drains. He was a forgotten character at best in many ways, and Dudley had been tipped off, in fact, by the intelligence services in Ireland by a guy called Dan Bryan, who was head of G2 military intelligence in the war. These people are very interested in how ideas spread, and he suggested to Dudley that new work should be done on Daniel O'Connell, so that Daniel O'Connell could be represented as the great person he was, the promoter of mass democracy in Europe, and Dudley ended up writing a book about him and speaking 50 years ago. We're just coming up to the 250th anniversary about the great man that Daniel O'Connell was, and both the president at that time and the Taoiseach also got involved in that campaign, and O'Connell's reputation was restored.
What do you think was his greatest achievement or his greatest piece of work?
I guess there are an awful lot of things you could say. He contributed a lot to archives. We wouldn't have the same archives. He really helped establish them in Ireland. But I would say it was the trusting people enough through the education system to get them to think for themselves.
You're launching the book next week, and you're going to have a special launch in Charlie Burns on Friday week, the 27th. Tell us about what will be happening on the night.
Sure. Well, Professor Nicholas Canny at 6 o'clock will be actually launching the book. He's one of the most famous of Galway University's professors, with an international reputation because of the work that he's done connecting the foundation of the plantations in Ireland with what eventually happened with the plantations in America and slavery. And so he will be launching the book. He knows a lot about Dudley and met him. And that's 6 o'clock at Charlie Burns.
And do you have another book coming in the works?
There are four ideas that come out of this one. It'll have me tied up for a long time.
Well, Neasa MacErlean, thank you for joining us on Galway Talks, and the very best of luck with the book as well. It's called Telling the Truth is Dangerous, How Robert Dudley Edwards Changed Irish History Forever. And that launch, as Neasa is after saying there, is going to be in Charlie Burns bookshops as well on Friday the 27th of June at 6 o'clock. The very best of luck with the book and with that launch as well. And thank you for joining us on Galway Talks.
Thank you.